Start a Therapy Practice Podcast, episode number 19.
You sit around here and you spin your little webs and you think the whole world revolves around you and your money. Well, it doesn't, Mr. Potter. In the whole vast configuration of things, I'd say you were nothing but a scurvy little spider.
The other evening, my family and I were sitting around the table, and one of my daughters said, "Average people long for the good old days, and rich people dream of the future." And I asked her, I said, "Where did you get that? That sounds so familiar. I've heard that before." And she said, "Daddy, you had us read that article called The 21 Ways Rich People Think Differently." And I said, "That's right." And here's a good use of technology here. On my Kindle, I can have assigned reading for my children. So from any website, if I see an article that's interesting, there's a Kindle extension that you can push and that will send that article to your Kindle. And on my Kindle, I can have a category that is called whatever I want it to be called. And I have a category called Assigned Reading for Kids. So my kids know that if they go on the Kindle, they can look at that category and say, "Oh, Dad's assigned me a reading." Well, this was one of those readings that I assigned. But in this article, and I'll put a link to this article in the show notes, titled 21 Ways Rich People Think Differently, that was one of the quotes. Average people long for the good old days. Rich people dream of the future. And under that phrase in this article, it says, self-made millionaires get rich because they're willing to bet on themselves and project their dreams, goals, and ideas into the unknown future. People who believe their best days are behind them rarely get rich and often struggle with unhappiness and depression. Now, I'm willing to bet that by the sheer fact that you're listening to me on this podcast, you think of your future as bright. Or if you don't think it's bright, you think it potentially could be bright, or at least a lot brighter than it is right now or it was back then. So before I go any further, let me introduce myself. My name is Scott Harmon, and I'm an occupational therapist, and my wife and I own and operate 2 pediatric therapy clinics. My wife is also an OT, and about a year ago, I decided that I wanted to start a podcast that would inform other therapists on how to start and run a private practice. I've had a lot of fun with this. I've been really encouraged by other therapists tell me that they appreciate the information that I give out, and they tell me that they are encouraged to do private practice or to do private practice better by listening to my podcast with interviews and other information. Now, if you're new to listening to the podcast, I really appreciate it. I wanted to do this particular podcast on general business information and startup, pretty much is what we're going to cover. And the reason I wanted to cover it right now is because I have a feature article coming out in the OT Connections magazine. This is the American OT Association's flagship magazine, and I am truly honored to have an article in it. So this is very cool. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand me from the opening discussion that I had here. I'm not rich. Monetarily, anyway, I'm not rich. I do okay, and I'm able to pay the bills. Spiritually, I'm wealthy. I am definitely blessed beyond what I deserve. I think like many of you, I grew up in a struggling household. My parents were separated when I was just a small boy, and I remember having to eat the government cheese and the government peanut butter, but we always had love in the family, so for that reason I am blessed also. I am also amazed and thankful to think of where I came from and where I am right now. Now, by no means do I think I have arrived, but my friend, this country is so great just for the sheer fact that I came from nothing and have so much now. This is one of the things that motivates me to help therapists do private practice. My private practice has given me much joy. Now, I don't think every therapist is cut out to own a private practice, but some of you are. And if you believe that you are cut out for private practice, then I want to give you some of the tools and information that helps you along the way, because that also gives me a lot of joy. If you listen to my productivity podcast, then you know that our motivation should be service to others. And so I have the opportunity to serve you by giving you good information on how to start a private practice. Now, if you go to my website at startatherapypractice.com, there's some free downloads there. And it occurred to me that I have a couple of spreadsheet downloads there that if you don't have Microsoft Office, you might be reluctant to download those spreadsheets that might be very helpful for you. there's a free alternative to Microsoft Office called LibreOffice, LibreOffice.org. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. I actually use LibreOffice on one of my computers, and I use Microsoft Office on some of my other computers. And while they are very similar, there is some differences. But free is free. LibreOffice is excellent for a free tool. So if you would like to download one of my spreadsheet tools on my website and need the software to run that on, check out LibreOffice for free. It's free. Also, when you're at the website, be sure to connect with me on Twitter. I also dabble in the Pinterest. I really love Twitter, though. I also have been dabbling in some videos. You can check those out at the website. I hope to put out some more videos in the near future when I get time. Been very busy at the clinic lately, but that is an okay thing because that helps pay the rent. Now, in this podcast, basically I want to do two things. I want to help those therapists who are just considering starting a private practice, but don't know exactly where to start or how to figure out how to go about it. The next thing I want to do is cover some bases for those of you who are in private practice, some basic business concepts, and then some actual practical tools on both of those points. Now, if you've been bitten by the entrepreneur bug like I have, you probably see potential business everywhere. Like recently, I saw all these political signs. You probably have too. And the thought ran through my head, what could I do with these political signs after this voting season is over to make some money? There's a trainload of these political signs, isn't there? What could you do to collect these signs, do something with those signs, and make some money? There's probably somebody doing that already. I hope there is. But that's just an example of how my brain works. I see potential businesses everywhere. Another idea I had was when I took my son to take his driver's test. Now, in my county, people take their driver's test at the county library, but you have to stand outside to wait in line, which is a long line, in order to take the test, because they're only going to take a few people in the building to take the test at a time. So you're waiting outside. So you get there 30, 45 minutes early, so you're not the 50th person in line, and you wait. This is the government for you, isn't it? But anyway, as we're there waiting, the thought occurs to me, could I set up a donut stand right here, sell some coffee? I know every one of those people would have bought a donut and some coffee from me. Why couldn't the library do that? Why don't libraries sell coffee like a Barnes & Noble? There again, the government. Just one more rant about the government. Why did it take them 50 years to figure out a forever stamp? I'm just saying. Okay, let's proceed. Actually, it took longer than 50 years, didn't it? Anyway, let's go on. My point was that if you have an entrepreneur's mind, you will see potential businesses everywhere, even when you're not trying. If you have that mindset and you're not doing private practice, you potentially could do really well at private practice. But you have to make sure that you do not get shiny object syndrome. You don't chase every little thing that comes in front of you. Sometimes you have to be focused. There again, listen to my productivity podcast episode on that one. So I'm not going to be able to give you all of the business skills that you will need and how those business skills relate to private practice. I can't do that. I wish I could, but that's why books exist, right? Speaking of books, be sure to check out my ebook on starting and running a therapy practice. I go into more detail about business and all kinds of stuff in there. I mean, that book is soup to nuts, head to toe, start to finish, what you need to know about starting and running a therapy practice. Now, one of my overall goals for having my website and doing this podcast is to help eliminate the fear of starting and running a private practice. If you have the desire to work for yourself, then nothing else is going to fill that void. I've had some therapists ask me here recently about some basic business and entrepreneur skills, where to pick those up at. Us therapists are not trained in school to know how to run a business, which is a shame, isn't it? We spent 15 years in school and we get out and we don't know anything about the building blocks of business, which really is what made this country great, is the small business and entrepreneurship. So the number one statements that I hear from therapists who want to start a private practice, well, actually there's two of them. They run a close race. One is, I don't know much about running a business. And the other is, I'm afraid I might fail and I'm afraid of the unknown. If you have the desire to start a private practice, or any business for that matter, don't let these two statements stop you. You must certainly put in your research, and it is a lot of hard work, but don't let fear stand in the way. Fear is an unreasonable adversary, and as therapists, we are trained to deal in logic. and best practices. We don't deal in fear. Now, don't go into private practice to become a mercenary, thinking that you're going to make a trainload of money because you have a private practice. I've mentioned before that money is a poor motivator, and starting a new business, whether it's private practice or any other business, is always going to be more difficult than you expect. So if you're in it just for the money, you will quickly burn out. As I mentioned before, service to others should always be your underlying motivation. Can you serve your potential clients better by having a private practice? Can you serve your family better by having a private practice? For those of you who are just thinking about starting a private practice, one skill that you're going to have, or an asset really, is that people like you and you like people. Even in my toughest jobs, whether it was therapy or something else, I always found consolation in the people that I worked with or the people that I was working to help. You must like and get along with all kinds of different people. If you're a loner and you hate people in general, please do not go into private practice. Your reputation is going to be of utmost importance. If you have a poor reputation in your community, it's going to be hard to get clients, isn't it? You need to be a likable person, and you need to be likable to different types of people, not just the demographic that you hang out with. If you are a difficult person to get along with, it's going to be hard to attract potential clients, potential employees, and potential therapists to work alongside you. If you can get along with anybody, that is going to be a great asset. Basically, do people who know you like you, and do they trust you? This should always be in the front of your mind with your private practice. People do business with people who they know, like, and trust. Building your reputation takes time and effort, but is going to be your most effective marketing tool. It takes a lifetime to build up that good reputation, but always remember that it can only take a few seconds to ruin that good reputation. Be aware of who you're hanging out with and the places that you go. Now, starting out, and even as you go along, you don't have to know everything about running a business. A lot of this you're going to learn along the way. I've learned so much from my private practice by running it, stuff that I would not have ever dreamed that I would know how to do, nor need to know how to do, which is another asset that you need. You need to be flexible. I find a lot of OTs out there often can be very flexible. I'm probably a little biased here, but I think OTs make great private practice owners because of this one skill right here. They are flexible, and they also tend to think out of the box. If they're living up to their OT standards, then they're trained to be a detective, to figure out this answer to problems, solutions. These are great skills for a private practice or any business owner. These are the skills that big companies look for. Can you solve a problem? Can you come at it from different angles that nobody else can? If you are that go-to person in your facility that you're working at now, and people come to you to solve some problems that they can't, or they ask you questions because you have the answers, you have great potential to have a private practice. Now, I do want you to be reading as many business books as you possibly can, to be listening to different business-minded people. You should always be doing this if you're in private practice, whether you're just thinking about it or whether you're already in private practice. You should be working through some business books. You should know as much as you can about business, but you certainly don't have to have an MBA. I certainly wish I would have known more about running a business before I started mine, and that is truly a motivation for me to be here helping you. Now, along with my own experiences, I'll be getting the following information from a few books. Two of the main ones I'll be referencing are The Personal MBA by Josh Kaufman. The other one is Disciplined Entrepreneurship by Bill Allett. And I will put links to all of what I mentioned in the show notes. So let's start from the beginning. For that therapist who's just contemplating starting a practice, how do you determine if there is a need and the potential for success in your geographical area? Should you open a brick and mortar practice, or should you start differently? There's a few things you want to look at. What is the purpose of your business? Who are the potential customers? What's the mission and values? Who are the business's competitors? What are they doing? And how can your business measure success? So you need to evaluate a few things in your personal life. Do you have enough time to commit to this venture? Because it's going to take a lot of time if you're serious about it, and you should be serious about it. Another one is, what type of resources do you have, money-wise, facility-wise, or anything else? Write down your connections and people you know, people who you can network with that can help you out in this venture. Now, you're going to need a few skills personally, or you're going to need to have someone who's close to you who has some skills, or you're going to have to outsource these skills. One is that you need to be familiar with spreadsheets and how to use them. If you don't know how to use spreadsheets, YouTube has a lot of videos on spreadsheets. I know I've probably mentioned lynda.com to learn anything, really. That's lynda.com. I mentioned flexibility in the amount of time that you have to put towards this venture. I mean, when I first started, I would put 14, 16-hour days in for a while. You need to have exceptional people skills. I mentioned that before. But you need to have the skill of listening, not just talking, but also to be able to relate to people's problems and to have the desire to fix those problems, whether it be a therapist who worked for you or a client or just somebody out in the community. You need to have thick skin. If you're overly sensitive, you're going to get your heart broke several times doing private practice, whether it's from a client, a therapist that you work with, or just somebody in the community. You're going to get disappointed on this adventure. You need to have the ability to brush that off and just keep going. You need to be humble enough to learn from the mistakes that you make that make other people mad at you, or just from a task that you didn't do right. You need to be able to change those things in yourself internally, or how you do the procedure or the task that you messed up on. You're human, you're going to make mistakes, but the great thing is that we can learn from these mistakes, and those are often the lessons that we learn best from, aren't they? Now, in order to know what mistakes to fix, you need to have someone in your life who's going to point out those errors. You need to have what I call the anti-yes man. Not ma'am, man, M-A-N. You've seen those people before. They surround themselves with people who agree with them. You need to have that person in your life who's going to say, look, you messed up. You can do better than that. You shouldn't have done that. You treated that person wrong. You need someone, at least one person, if not more than one, to point those errors out to you. And then, like I said, you need to be humble enough to take that advice, make the change, and better yourself. That's really the only way that you're going to get better in life at anything. You need to have the desire and the motivation to constantly learn about your business and the way you do therapy and anything else that is going to make your practice better. Constantly learning. Another skill you need is to be fearless when talking to people who control your destiny as far as your business is concerned. Or you at least need to have the desire to be fearless when that occasion comes up. Because as you do private practice, you're going to be talking to people, whether it be a doctor or someone else who potentially could refer to you, who control your destiny as far as your business is concerned. People smell fear. Don't be desperate. People know when you're desperate, and they will not want to refer to you any business. Now, honestly, this is something I have to work on. I've gotten better at this over the years. I knew just instinctually that people would know I was desperate if I acted desperate. Often I'll overcome this with humor. I'm fairly quick with a joke or a bit of wit, but sometimes that backfires, so I have to be careful with that too. So the point is, don't act desperate and work on not acting desperate. Another skill to have is to be very proficient with a specialty or a niche skill. Many therapists are NDT certified. PTs right now are into dry needling. Speech therapists can be into feeding skills, or there's all kinds of different specialty skills that you might have that you can tap and benefit from. Now, in the book, The Personal MBA, he has an interesting scorecard on determining whether you should open a business. Now, of course, his is not therapy private practice specific, but I think it's a good place to start just to further the conversation. So with this scorecard, he wants you to score the following 10 questions on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being very good, 0 being very bad. He says if you're not sure, be very conservative in your scoring. So if you're driving or not able to add up this score, you can open up the calculator app on your smartphone, just punch in the numbers and let your phone add it up. So here we go. Let's add these up, 0 to 10. The first one is urgency. How bad do people want your service right now? The second one is market size. How many people are actively purchasing similar services in your geographical area? The third one, pricing potential. What is the highest price that a person would be willing to pay for your service? You should consider your funding sources. A potentially poor area may have decent government-paid therapy, whereas an economically richer area may have more out-of-pocket payers, which is fine, but you may want to have a larger population for that type of practice. So consider your funding sources. What's the pricing potential? What is the highest price that a person would pay for your service? Number 4, the cost of customer acquisition. In other words, how easy is it to acquire a new customer? How much would you have to spend in time and in money to acquire a new client? Number 6, uniqueness of offer. In other words, how unique is your offer compared to the competition in your same area? Do you have a specialty, a niche specialty that you can offer that's not being offered? Number 7, speed to market. How fast can you deliver your services? For therapists, this is probably not a big deal unless you need a brick-and-mortar clinic or specialty equipment. We can all probably deliver our services fairly quick. Number 8, upfront investment. How much would you have to put into this in order to make a sale, in order to make multiple sales? What would be your upfront cost? So if you wouldn't have to put very much money into this, or none at all, that would be a 10. Number 9, upsell potential. What other services can you provide aside from the main service in order to upsell the potential client? I know a lot of PTs do this. They'll offer the main service, their physical therapy, whether it be a manipulative type of service or an exercise type of service, and then they'll upsell them maybe a massage or something else. Chiropractors are also great at this. I mean, most people are not going to the chiropractor, and I don't mean to mention PTs and chiropractors in the same breath. I know I'm probably offending some PTs. I'm just trying to make a point. Most people are not just going to the chiropractor to receive some manual type of therapy. You're going to walk out of there with some nutrition supplements too, aren't you? I've never been to the chiropractor. I don't know, but I hear these tales. Dentists are similar right now. You're not just going to get your teeth cleaned. You might go get them whitened also. They might upsell you that or some sort of other cosmetic type of thing for your teeth. So in other words, what's the upsell potential? Number 10, evergreen potential. Once your offer has been presented, how often will you have to tweak that offer in order to keep it fresh? So in the therapy world, do you need to keep your name and your business out there in the community? Or once you're there, will people remember that you're there? Will you have to continually visit different doctors or put ads in certain periodicals and websites? So that's 10. So he says that if your score is below 50, then your potential for your business is very poor. If the score is 75 or above, you have a very promising idea. Anything between 50 and 75 has potential, but it's going to take a lot of effort. So remember, your score potentially could be very high if you're not going to open a brick-and-mortar clinic, if you're not going to be paying any rent. This test might not be the best test to determine whether you go into private practice, but I wanted to give it to you to get your mind going in a certain direction. Now remember, even though there might be competition in your area already, that could be a good sign because it lets you know that people are willing to pay for the service that you also want to provide. There's a market for your service. The best way of seeing what your competition is doing is to become a customer of your competition. So I sign up for the newsletters that my competition puts out in my geographical area. It lets me know what they're up to and also gives me ideas of things that I can provide. If you know anybody who has been to the competition as a customer, ask them what they thought of their experience there. Ask them what they did good, what they did bad, what they should work on. Ask open-ended questions. Now, your idea of having a private practice in your geographical location of choice is probably going to be a very subjective idea. You may be so enamored with your idea of having a private practice that you cannot think objectively about that business. So you need to be sure to ask multiple people about their opinion of having a private practice in your area. You especially need to ask other similar professionals, whether it be nurses, other therapists, doctors, teachers, anybody you can think of who will be objective. If you go ask your mom about having a private practice, she's probably going to tell you it's a brilliant idea because she's your mom and she loves you. And while you certainly want to ask your friends and family, take it with a large grain of salt. Put more weight on those people who you really don't know and what their opinion is about starting a therapy private practice in your area. Like I said, be sure to ask open-ended questions, especially of potential clients. When you're talking to these people, the professionals and potential clients, be sure to listen more than you talk. Ask the open-ended question and let them talk. Don't cut them off, just let them go. In my productivity episode, I mentioned Evernote. You need to start taking very good notes about what all these people say about starting a private practice, because you're going to hear some brilliant ideas, and you're going to come up with some brilliant ideas of your own. So learn how to use Evernote. It's one of those tools that you need to know how to use. Now remember, when you ask for honest feedback from friends, family, and especially people that you really don't know that well, you're going to have some thick skin, because nobody wants to hear that they have an ugly baby, do they? And you've had this idea of having a private practice for a little while, and when you present that to somebody and you think it's brilliant, and they shoot it down, or they shoot some aspect of it down, don't get offended. If someone expresses total dislike of your idea, that's really not as big a problem as it might be. But if somebody is very apathetic about it, and they're just like, I don't know, that's the response that you have to be careful of. It's not a good sign if nobody cares about your idea. Now, I want you to remember that many entrepreneurs often spend a lot of time on their business model. In other words, how are you going to provide your therapy service? You should spend some time on developing a potential client user profile. I'm not going to go over that in this episode. I do plan on going over creating that user profile in a future marketing episode. I do go over that in some depth in my ebook, but we'll save that for another episode also. But suffice it to say, many business owners and therapists spend a lot of time developing this user profile and showing how they will create value for the client. But then the business owner or the therapist barely spends any time figuring out how that value that they want the client to have translates into a profitable business. They're so excited about the product or the service that they're going to provide to the market that they just default to adopting whatever other business models out there. So what I'm saying is, can you deliver your service in a unique way, in a different way, in a better way than what your competition is doing? These are the things that you need to take notes on in your Evernote. What types of business model can you come up with? It is also very difficult to change your business model once you have established it. So will you do home health, nursing homes? Will you have a brick and mortar clinic, see kids in a daycare? Or maybe you could come up with a whole new business model. Maybe you could mix some of these together. So consider testing many options before setting on one type of business model. Look at it through the perspective of your customer's eyes, not just through a therapist's eyes. That's why you want to ask a lot of different people their opinion. Now, the business model can also include how you charge for those services. We can charge an hourly rate as far as therapy goes. Have you ever considered having a membership rate? I've considered that. What if a potential client paid me a certain amount per month, and that guarantees them so many sessions per month of therapy? Now, whether they show up or not is no big deal. I still have the money. If they show up, then fine, I'll deliver the service. I give the example just to have another way of your brain to think about how to deliver your service and how to charge for your service. Start noticing how other similar businesses provide service. What about a health gym? How do gym memberships work? What about music lessons? How do music lessons work? So look at other businesses that are somewhat similar to providing therapy and see how they do it. But be careful to not spend too much time trying to be clever with your business model. I don't want you to lose focus on creating value, because value is going to be of the utmost importance to your potential clients. What are they getting for their buck? Now, starting a private practice, it may be beneficial to do this on the side, as a side project, just to test the waters, to test the market to see if there is a need and if it'll grow. You could create somewhat of a prototype of your service. You could potentially act it out or pitch it in a video, put it on YouTube, direct people to it, and ask for comments, whether they think they would be interested in your service. The point of the prototype is not to get it perfect from the beginning, but rather to get the feedback in order to perfect the prototype of your service, just to see what people want. Subleasing a room or an area in an existing business is a good way to test the waters, to float your idea of having a private practice. Certainly you wouldn't want to sign a multi-year sublease. If you could sign like a 6-month sublease somewhere for a little bit of nothing, you could test the waters of having a private practice. Now, similar to subleasing, you could do a class or an in-service or some sort of camp for like a day or even just a few hours, maybe at the library. It's kind of like shadow testing to see if your service is needed or wanted. I would certainly create a website for your potential private practice. This is a great way to direct people to your potential service, to sign up for maybe those potential classes or camps that you could put on, just to see if you get enough people interested. You don't necessarily have to come up with the camp or the class or the in-service. You could create the website and put enough information on there for them to have an idea of what you're wanting to do. And then if you get enough people to sign up, then create the class, the in-service, or the camp. I certainly don't want you to go out there and sign a multi-year lease on a large facility and only have a couple clients to see. This could be detrimental for so many reasons. That's why I like to interview therapists who are in private practice, and I ask them specifically how they got started. How did they grow that business? I think if you listen to enough of those interviews, you're going to see a pattern of they started small and they grew. So remember, in your private practice or your potential private practice, focus on what the people want, not necessarily what you think they want. You're coming at it from a therapist perspective. Come at it from a client perspective. You could use Maslow's hierarchy to pinpoint what people want. We all have a desire to acquire and achieve status. We all have the desire to bond, to feel needed. We all have the desire to learn and to satisfy curiosity. We have the drive to defend and protect who we are and what we have. That is basically Maslow's hierarchy. Now, I would also include in there the desire to be entertained or to feel a new sensation. And that is right up a therapist alley, isn't it? It's basically the desire to feel good. Nobody wants to feel sick or to feel pain. The more clearly that you can explain how your business delivers these things, the better your business will do. Now, always remember that given the choice, people will always choose the path that achieves them the most status, especially in the society that we are in today. We all have our basic needs met, don't we? We're all pretty well fed. We all have a roof over our head. We're more than entertained. And so through the hierarchy, we all want to achieve the highest status that we can. I mean, why do you think they make a Ferrari? Why do you think they make handbags that cost $30,000? It's status. I mean, just look at Facebook. People aren't putting their worst face on Facebook, are they? They want to make themselves look good. So you want to build social appeal into your offer if you can. Now remember also that the more your interests are aligned with your prospective customer's interests, the more successful you're going to be. Don't try to sell them something that they don't want. You want to be their advocate in the service that they're getting. Also remember that not every customer is a good customer. There's just some people out there that are going to say bad things about everybody, no matter what they do. You don't want that person as a customer. If they're going to badmouth you and your business, and they're going to sap your time and energy to an extraordinary degree, just let them go. Be nice about it, but let them go. I used to have some clients who would sit in my waiting room, and they would badmouth everybody. And they would spend some time on badmouthing my clinic and the therapist, and there was only a couple of them, but they would badmouth everybody in the whole community. Nobody did right by these people. So some people can only complain. All right, I want to move on to numbers. Much of what you will do in business, with your small business or with your private practice, is going to be to track numbers. You must track numbers in your business. Numbers are important. Track numbers from the very beginning of your private practice. How many units, how many hours are you treating every day, every week, every month? Where are the referrals coming from? At what times of the month are they coming? At what times of the year are they coming? Track all of those numbers. This is why you need to know how to use a spreadsheet. I have different ways of tracking these numbers. Even though I have an electronic medical record software that I pay for, I still use spreadsheets to track a lot of these numbers. I do offer one of these spreadsheets on the website for free, so if you want to check that out, you can go over there and download it at startatherapypractice.com. Now, numbers are also important when you're starting to think about starting your private practice. How many clients do you need every week, every month, every quarter, every year to break even, to pay the rent if you're doing a brick and mortar, to pay your insurance, to make it worthwhile? when I first started, I figured that I needed a little over 50 clients to be able to pay my rent at my clinic, and for me just to see a few clients. I was going to have someone else see the 50 clients. That way I could do other things for my clinic instead of working in my clinic. So determine your break-even point. Track your numbers, track your bills, have a budget, create a business plan, and if you need help with any of that, I would strongly suggest that you check out my ebook, but certainly read as many business books as you can. The Small Business Administration has a great website. I will put a link on the show notes to that website, and you will also want to check out my Learning Resources page on the website, which has websites, books, and podcast recommendations. You've got a lot to learn, so I want you to constantly be learning. Do less entertaining and more learning. There's another quotation from the 21 Ways Rich People Think that says, average people would rather be entertained than educated. Rich people would rather be educated than entertained. And it says, while rich people don't put much stock in furthering wealth through formal education, they appreciate the power of learning long after college is over. Walk into a wealthy person's home, and one of the first things you'll see is an extensive library of books that they've used to educate themselves on how to become more successful. The middle class read novels, tabloids, and entertainment magazines. Don't let that be you. And I don't want you to think that Scott just wants to make money. Of course I want to make money. Money is not the root of all evil. The love of money is the root of all evil. It's like I tell my kids. Money is a tool just like anything else. If I want to clean a window, I'm not going to use a hammer. You can use money for good and you can use money for bad. But the love of money is really going to get you in trouble. I want you to be in the therapy private practice business to serve others. You can serve others, not just serve your clients, but also to serve your family. It is my desire that you don't be average. I want you to be rich, monetarily, spiritually, physically, and mentally. So I'll leave you with this last quote from this article, that average people believe you have to do something to get rich. Rich people believe you have to be something to get rich. While the masses are fixated on doing and the immediate results of their actions, the great ones are learning and growing from every experience, whether it's a success or a failure, knowing that their true reward is becoming a human success machine that eventually produces outstanding results. So that's my desire for you, to be something, to be a great therapist. So I appreciate you listening today. Before I sign off here, I do want to let you know that I did pick a winner of my ebook from the Productivity Podcast. We had some very good comments on how they are productive. So be sure to go by there and check out their productivity tips. And by the way, the therapist who won a free copy of my ebook was an OT, who I know will be a great private practice owner. All right, see you later. Be sure to stop by the website, startatherapypractice.com. Send me any email questions you might have. Send me a tweet, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks.